Hey, what's up, guys? So, in this week's episode of 5 Minute Fridays, I want to talk about some of the most common reasons why you may not actually get the range that you're expecting from your detector. I've seen a lot of you guys ask, hey, I've got this detector, but I'm getting shorter range than I thought I'm supposed to be. Is something wrong with my detector? Is my detector defective? Is it a dud? What's going on? There's actually quite a few reasons why you will, in some instances, see less range than maybe you would otherwise want, and yet that's totally normal. I've seen a lot of people actually return perfectly good detectors because of this. And so I want to talk a little bit more about kind of how all this works, explain things a little bit more to help you guys have a better understanding and thus more maybe realistic expectations about what you can expect in practice. So there's a number of reasons why you may see this when you're driving around. The first thing has to do with if the officer is using instant on. We've talked about this in a previous episode of 5 Minute Fridays, and basically, radar guns are not always on. If the officer has intentionally turned off his radar gun and he only turns it on when you get close, then yeah, in those instances, you will get shorter detection ranges. Officers often do this intentionally to help avoid being detected until, he can see you and you can see him, to avoid detection by radar detector users. That's one of the reasons why it's nice to maybe have other traffic ahead of you so that he's clocking other cars before you get close, and that helps you get longer detection ranges in case the officer is trying to do something a little bit sneaky. Another thing that can impact your range is the terrain that you're driving in. If you're driving in the wide open flat desert where there's nothing in between you and the radar gun, with a sensitive radar detector you could pick up the signal 10 miles away or more. If you're driving in a situation where you've got trees around, curves, mountains, hills, anything that can physically block the radar signal and prevent your radar detector from being able to see the signal, in those situations, yeah, the terrain itself can actually limit the maximum detection range that you can get. Out here where I drive, I'm happy to get a mile of range. That's awesome. Typically, I'm seeing maybe closer to a quarter mile or a half a mile of range, even with a really sensitive radar detector. And so, terrain can have a really big impact on your range. Even things like the direction the radar gun is pointed. A lot of police officers have not one, but two antennas, one in the front of their vehicle, a second one in the back, so they can clock in both directions. If he's clocking the other direction of travel, he's not pointed towards your vehicle, but he's pointed and, operating his radar gun in the opposite direction, you're going to have a much weaker signal to pick up. Basically, his radar signal is going to be traveling out this way, it bounces off other cars, and it bounces back to him. Then it's going to keep going, and maybe you'll pick it up back over here. And so you're picking up the reflections of signals coming back to his radar gun, and so because those signals are weaker, you will pick up a weaker signal and thus have less range. The sensitivity of your radar detector matters quite a bit, of course. If you have a more sensitive detector, this will help. But, if you have a really bad radar detector with poor sensitivity, of course you're not going to have good range. But chances are, if you're watching my channel, you're going to wind up with a good detector with good sensitivity. So typically, you're not going to have that issue. Now, the settings of your detector, no matter which one you choose, can also have an impact. You can do some things like, enable custom sweeps or maybe disable some of the filters to help extend the range of your detector and give you better performance. Alternatively, maybe if you enable some of the filters to cut down on false alerts, that can then limit the range of your detector as kind of a trade-off. And so the settings that you choose, a lot of times, are going to be a balance between more sensitivity, more range, better detection, and a quieter detector with better filtering and fewer false alerts. So there's a trade-off, and so the settings that you choose for your detector can impact things. Which radar gun the officer is using can also impact things. If he's using something that's kind of a lower powered radar gun, like the Falcon HR, the Raptor RP1, things like that do have reduced power output levels, that can impact things. The multi-radar or Redflex ones are even more lower powered, so those can be even harder to detect, but the majority of the ones that we see here in the US, they're all full powered, high powered radar guns, and so any good detector should have no problem detecting those. And then finally, after we consider all these options, it is possible that you have a bad detector. That does happen from time to time. We talk about hot units versus cold units. We've done a bunch of testing before in the past where people will have maybe 5, 6, 8, 10 copies of the same detector to see how much sample variance there is. And we see that, yes, there is some detectors are a little bit better, some are a little bit worse. We don't see huge swings or so. They're all within kind of manufacturer's tolerances and whatnot. And so that's not something to assume out of the gate. It can happen, but it's not very likely. In terms of likeliness, it's going to be something else in terms of maybe the terrain or what direction his radar gun is pointed or something along those lines. Those are very, very common things. Something as far as your detector maybe having a bad copy of a detector, that's certainly possible, but it's going to be less likely than some of the other options. So anyways, these are a variety of things that can impact the range of your detector and affect how far away you're able to pick up a police officer. If there's anything that I missed, let me know down in the comment area of some additional things that you guys have noticed can also also impact the detection that you guys have seen. So yeah, let me know what additional questions you have, and I may cover them in an upcoming episode of 5 Minute Fridays. Awesome. That's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys in the next video.